John Carlin, our next speaker, is a renowned journalist and author. During his career, he has written for the Financial Times, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Independent, and the Guardian, among others. He has written articles and books on subjects and people such as Rafael Nadal, Diego Maradona, Nelson Mandela, and Real Madrid. The latest book published by Mr. Carlin is Chase Your Shadow, The Trials of Oscar Pistorius. Mr. Carlin will join us soon on stage and discuss how Iceland is kicking above its weight. Later on, he will be joined in panel discussions by Bjarni Benediktsson, Minister of Finance and former center half of Stjarnan, Illugi Gunnarsson, Minister of Education, Science and Culture, Ari Kristinn Jónsson, President of Reykjavík University, and Jón Rúnar Halldórsson, business owner and chairman of Icelandic Champions FH. Please welcome John Carlin.
Good morning. It really is an honor and a pleasure to be here because I stand before you as a huge fan of Iceland. I've been here about a dozen times in the last 10 years, and not only am I a huge fan, I'm a huge propagandist of Iceland. I've written articles in English and in Spanish that have been published all over the world, and every time I sit at a dinner table in some place, I find myself invariably singing the praises of Iceland, describing it as a place which is, in my view, as good as it gets, given the limitations of the human species. And in fact, I've just had, no one here will know this, but actually in Spain, they just published a book of mine about Iceland, a collection of my articles about Iceland. And given this, I would like to seize the opportunity that the finance minister, my friend Bjarni, is here, to say publicly what I say privately, that it's high time I got a percentage cut on Iceland's tourism revenues. However, even if that humble request is turned down, I shall not wane in my admiration and love for Iceland. And it's because I have these feelings about Iceland that I was absolutely appalled, shocked, and outraged to learn yesterday that there is a piece of advice going around this country regarding the forthcoming European Championships. Namely, there are people saying that Iceland should lower its expectations. You should cool down. You should not dream. You should be realistic. I say to hell with that. That's not my vision anyway. Maybe my rose-tinted, ridiculously inflated vision of Iceland, but that's not my vision of the Icelander spirit. I say, people are saying, oh, we have a manageable group. We've got Austria, Hungary, Portugal. We can get through to the next round. To hell with that. Win the damn thing. That's my position on this. I mean, imagine, what is the great founding legend of this country from which you all get your identity here, the Vikings? The Vikings that went off to Constantinople, that discovered America. Before that, Spanish-financed Italian imposter Christopher Columbus. Imagine if people had said, but Gunnar, but Eric, what are you doing? Be realistic, lower your expectations, stay at home and carry on fishing like the rest of us. I mean, what would this country be? And then, then the other great lasting contribution of this country, the sagas. A couple of hundred years after you guys discovered America, someone decided to start writing down the sagas. You can imagine someone saying, but Egil, but Gunnar, whatever, what are you doing writing down these sagas? There's only about 5,000 of us here anyway, and it's so wet that the paper's going to get destroyed and no one's going to see it anyway. But the sagas endure as a sort of lasting legacy to world literature. And then, of course, yes, after that, there was a bit of a quiet period. I mean, I see Iceland as a nation of dreamers, but of practical dreamers. And I think that if you live in a country like this, most of which are simply not fit for human habitation, then, you're by definition, you guys are survivors. And to be survivors, you have to be practical. You can't spend time, on fancy ideologies and dreams. You've got to survive from day to day. You have to be practical. And so after the discovery of America and so forth, in my humble understanding of Icelandic history, you went through a bit of a quiet period of 600 or so years in which you just were content not to dream but to be practical and to survive, and nothing very much happened here until you had, of course, the immense good fortune of the Second World War coming along. It was a catastrophe for the rest of the planet, but it was a golden opportunity for this country, as you know very well, thanks to the arrival of the American soldiers and a contingent of British soldiers too. You seized that opportunity and you've been rocking and rolling ever since. The most notable, the first time that Iceland came to my attention, I guess I was a teenager in England, was during the Cod Wars, when I discovered to my horror this pesky little island up in the north had just defeated the might of the British Empire. And I think for the second time, I think you defeated us in the 50s in the shorter version of the Cod Wars. And so that's when the country first came to my attention. And I came here for the first time in 2006. And I'd never met an Icelander. I was intrigued by it ever since, like I say, your heroic defeat of the mighty British Empire in the Cod Wars. And I'd never met an Icelander. And of course, to meet an Icelander, you actually normally have to make a bit of an effort. The Icelanders don't grow on trees, don't appear all over the place. But the first Icelander I met, I was living in Barcelona. And it was Edo Gudjonsson. I phoned up the club and I said, I'd like to talk to Edo Gudjonsson, but not about football, about Iceland. And I'm sure he sighed a huge sigh of relief, you know, not another boring reporter asking me about football. So he agreed to see me immediately. And I liked him immensely. He was obviously extremely proud of his nation. That came across. And he was extremely proud himself. I remember asking him if he was not a little bit overawed to be playing in the company of players like Ronaldinho and Xavi and Iniesta were coming up, Messi were just around the corner, to which he replied, what? They should be overawed, not me. And so I got a bit of a sense of, you know, what you people were like in terms of the dream factor pretty early on. And then I came here, and I really was quite blown away. I was amazed at this country, which has got, I don't know, about a 30th of the population of London, but you really, really, really do punch above your weight, or as I say now, in the context of football, kick above your weight. I mean, I was amazed by, for a start, the fact that the average Icelander definitely speaks English better than the average English man or woman, for starters. Also, you know, the fact that you've got 300,000 people, you've got your own national opera, your own national symphony, philharmonic. I met people who made films that were made in Hollywood, extraordinary writers that have been successful the world over, music, of course. And indeed, what surprised me most was the quality of the food, which is quite remarkable. And this was 10 years ago, and you've come along quite a long way since then, too. One of the first people I met was Siggy Hall, who's my first big friend here, and he introduced me to the delights of Icelandic cooking, not something one would immediately have associated with this country, which was more sort of associated with rotten sharks and all that sort of stuff. But no, you've definitely moved on since that in a very, very big way. I think the food here is really world class. But anyway, but yes, so you were punching above your weight, kicking above your weight, doing so well, but there came a point, obviously, when this sort of balance, I'm talking about practical dreamers, the dream balance became too heavy, and you went slightly bonkers and convinced yourself that not only could you do good music, good food, good this, good that, speak English and all the rest of it so well, you were actually the world's greatest bankers too. And you decided to buy half of London and all of Copenhagen and West Ham United and God knows what. And this was really sailing a little bit too far into the storm or flying a little bit too close to the sun. And you had your absolute sort of catastrophe meltdown, and you were the first to fall into the hole and deeper than anybody else. Which was a great disappointment and actually very embarrassing for me, because I had been in the previous months in hyper-propaganda mode about Iceland as the UN index, happiest place in the world, blah, blah, blah. I looked like a complete idiot, so thank you for that, Iceland, and those of you who led the country into the hole. But then you bounced back so amazingly well. I bitterly regret not having rushed over to Iceland and bought myself a property back in 2008. That was the time to do it. I see now property prices have increased massively. But then I remember coming here in 2012, and things were beginning to pick up. And I saw this very building, the Harpa that we're in now, this beautiful sort of Reykjavík's version of Bilbao's Guggenheim Museum in glass form. And this had not been here when I'd been here before at the time of the crisis. And I thought, what on earth is this about? So I was told, well, you've got to go and see a lady who's a Minister of Education, and she'll explain it to you, Katrin Jakobsdottir. And I was warned that she didn't really look like a minister, and in fact, someone said to me she looks about 12 years old. But just so I met her, and in fact, I saw this was an exaggeration. She actually looked all of 15 or 16. I remember meeting her at the ministry and thinking she was wearing sort of I don't know, torn jeans and a T-shirt, and I thought maybe she was a person who was bringing the tea or something. And then I started talking to her, and I realized she was a sort of highly intelligent, fabulous woman. Actually, I think she was 36 at the time with a couple of kids. And she explained to me, and I think this very building is an important metaphor for what we're talking about here. Namely that, as you all know much better than I, when the crisis struck, the foundations had been built for this magnificent construction. But the crisis came, and they were cutting on other basic services and what have you. And so the question was, how could we possibly carry on with this extraordinary extravaganza of building this beautiful and mightily expensive building? And as Catherine Jacobsdottir explained to me, well, we decided to go ahead anyway. We needed, at a practical level, we needed a building for our National Philharmonic. But above all, the decision was taken to continue with this building despite the crisis as a sort of symbol of hope and inspiration and, you know, Icelanders' yes we can spirit. And so that I found to be an extraordinarily eloquent demonstration of the best of the Icelanders, that combination, like I say, I insist, of practical and dreaminess. And now we face the European Championships, and we live in crazy times. And Iceland is a bit of a crazy country. There is that crazy, you know, the dreaminess has a crazy dimension. But Iceland, I think, is very much in tune with the world times. I mean, we have Donald Duck, or rather Donald Trump, as the Republican candidate. Who on earth would have imagined that a year ago? You know, we have a Muslim mayor of London. Who on earth would have imagined that a year ago? We have the seemingly immortal Sepp Blatter has fallen too. Just so many examples of extraordinary things going on around the world. And of course, as was mentioned before by the mayor, Leicester City, who, you know, as everybody knows, at the beginning of the season on the betting odds were 5,000 to 1 to win the British Premiership, which they did win. And I was actually looking at the betting odds yesterday for Iceland to win the European Championships. It's 100 to 1. Now that is a sign of extraordinary respect, I would say. I mean, 5,000 to 1 was Leicester. 100 to 1. So as soon as this conference is over, I'm going to go and place a small bet myself on Iceland winning the championships. Maybe I won't bet my house, but maybe I'll put £5 or so. I have faith. I believe that Iceland can do it. And, why not? Because there is clearly the football team, from what I've seen from people I've talked to, there is that combination of practicality and dreaminess built into it. There's been a lot of strategy and forethought in the development of Icelandic football over the last 10, 15 years. It's not an accident. As Ramon Calderón was saying, these things don't happen by, miracles don't happen. There's always a sort of 99% element of hard work, but also there's a tremendous spirit clearly in this team. There's clearly an element of perfect storm, a convergence of players of talent with players who have a good chemistry between them, a good chemistry with the coach. And these are the elements that made Leicester City achieve the impossible. And why not? And if Iceland were to win the European Championships, it would probably be the greatest moment in your history. Never mind the Vikings discovering America, or the sagas, or even the glorious victory of the Cod Wars. This would be something so enormous, so mighty. So let's dream and let's hope it happens. Thank you very much.